Fernando, how nice to have you on the line.
Domenico, how nice to hear from you. By the way, I admire how you did our countdown. Five, four. I'm not sure I could be so coordinated.
Oh yeah, I do it a lot. We're did you know we're approaching episode 100 for this podcast?
Wow, I admire it. I admire that.
Yeah, so
It's
cool. And I've met so many great people.
it's interesting to do that because it's kind of you think in terms of starting and finishing a project, but a project such as this, it could go on for 100 more and
That's right.
still be going on. It doesn't
Still be
finish.
going on. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
We talk to contractors on this show, and in a second we'll get to your intro, but you opened up something that's happening in my business, and I want people to know I'm going through the same growth challenges they go through. Just in the last week, I've hired a PR person to help me find great guests, and
Wow.
I've hired another person just to help me administer the Facebook page. And so finding the right people and putting together a team isn't a challenge that is just for people who are on the tools building or modifying,
Sure.
demolishing, maintaining or servicing equipment, buildings. It's also for
Hmm.
any business, right? So I'm going through the same challenges that anybody listening might be.
Sure.
Fernando, I can't help but say your name with some flair because it sounds like such a like I want to say it in a classy way. Fernando, can you tell us who you are and how the heck you come to be talking to a group of construction professionals, the greatest group of construction professionals, by the way, around the world?
Good. Well, Dominique, that's not exactly a common name either. Uh,
Yeah,
well,
no.
like you said, my name sort of gives away my origin. I was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Immigrated here fairly young, although I went back then to Buenos Aires for my adolescence and returned here to finish my high school and go to college. As Well, my aspirations were not in construction. As you can probably tell by my shirt and my background, I had kind of academic aspirations. I was an art student,
Ah,
and I ended up doing construction work actually from a young age, but not at all from an interest in construction per se, but because we were immigrants, had little money,
yeah,
and I liked to go away on summer vacation. And the way that I would go was hitchhiking at the time to different places,
wow,
and I would volunteer. And when I volunteered, that's how I sort of paid my escape. I would always end up working with some kind of a crew that was doing construction work of some kind, mostly scraping paint, but something along those lines.
was it mission
And
work, Fernando? Like, did you volunteer for churches, or is it something else?
well, it's similar, but it wasn't churches. I was volunteering at Buddhist
Oh, how cool!
monasteries
Great.
as a young young guy who was an aspiring Buddhist.
Ah,
I am no longer an aspiring Buddhist, but I was, and I wanted to hang out at the Buddhist retreats and temples, and they always had need for guys to use as
right.
slaves, as spiritual
Yeah,
slaves,
yeah, yeah.
and that was my role. And by default, I began to learn the trade. For example, I spent an entire summer in Quebec, Canada, building a home and small temple for refugee monks from Tibet.
Wow. Oh, yeah. Of course,
And
Tibet
there I
is
even and one of the and at the time the Dalai Lama had just been kicked out of Tibet, and there was a lot of refugee monks from Tibet, and these were going to Canada, and we're building a place for them. And one of the things I learned on that particular volunteer mission was how to frame a dormer. I still
Oh, you'd
remember
never
that
done that
because
before?
it was I had never I was just I had never done framing.
Ah,
However, once all that experience kind of came to me by default, it became like a river that ran through my life. Something that went on because I found myself needing money from time to time,
yeah, as we
and
do,
I
right?
could I could paint a painting, I could compose some music, but nobody wanted to pay me for that. However, I could build you a fence. I
Right,
could plaster your walls. I could, do all these things that people were willing to pay for. And when I needed money, I had to do something people were willing to pay for.
right.
So I did that. Later on, I went to art school. In fact, I graduated from a very good one on the West Coast from Cal Arts.
Oh,
And there, what did I do? I volunteered in the shop. The shop was where they made all of the props for sets, for movie
Mm,
sets, for dance
right.
recitals, for productions, and we actually did some movie sets for low-level Hollywood films too, because the school was in Los Angeles. We were near Hollywood, and we did this. And I learned a lot of carpentry skills there, and I learned how to use all the tools, and ended up doing work for teachers. I would do work for my teachers. They would say, "Come
Like
over and
you
do
would
some
go
fun
work on their personal properties, you mean?
on their personal properties."
I
Yes,
see. Okay. Yeah.
and that's how I made money as a student. And well, I graduated. I met my future wife, and had my my first kids, and the issue of money kept creeping up, and the fact
As
that
it
I had
does, right? As it does. And
this
it,
one, yes, it does. And I work with a lot of young men who often feel that this was not their dream job, that this was, construction, that was not what they were born to do.
yeah.
However, you can make it into something that really feels very satisfying, and it accomplishes a lot, and it does make a good living.
Mm.
And that's what I managed to do. And we're going to get into some of that
Well,
uh,
yeah, because you've
in a
become
little
an
bit.
author. You've become an
Yes,
author as well. That's why you're here on the show,
yes,
because you've got a couple of Amazon bestsellers around
yeah,
building an affordable building, really.
yes, yes. Well, that ties into my life story as well, because as an immigrant, I was always one, somewhat impoverished, and two, I didn't have an old boy network. It was
Mm.
impossible for me to like get into the higher echelons of whatever it was, wherever I was. I was always, sort of on the lower echelons. So I became very familiar with what life was like in an affordable house,
Yeah, that's
and what
very
life
nicely
was like
said. Yeah,
in an affordable neighborhood, if you will. And I was unafraid of the affordable neighborhoods because I knew them. I knew the
yeah,
people. When you know the people, they're not so scary.
that's
So
right.
I
Yeah.
understood that environment, and I began working in that environment. And I built my first home in a place called Val Verde in Los Angeles, which was had been a black community from segregation days.
Oh,
It had
wow.
been a
Yeah.
black resort community. And there's a lot of tiny little lots that used to be for summer vacation cabins. It became an immigrant camp eventually for people working the fields around it. There's a lot of agriculture around it, and the lots were pretty cheap. I bought my first lot in Los Angeles for $10,000.
Oh, wow. That is a long time ago.
No, it was a long time ago, and it was the nature of that neighborhood too. It wasn't like you could get lots in Los Angeles for $10,000. It was the
Yeah.
nature of that neighborhood. And to this day, I recently purchased a lot for $15,000. I look for that kind of property because the first check you write is for the land if you're building affordable housing.
Right.
And you cannot build a $200,000 house on a $150,000 lot. And I mean, it
No.
doesn't make
Yeah, the
sense.
math doesn't
So
make
the
sense at
lot
all.
is the
Yeah.
first thing. So I have designed, and I have sort of boilerplated or created templates of small footprint houses. And I build those houses on usually kind of discarded lots. Like
Right.
I go to the developer and I say, "Do you have any really crummy lots?" Which is a strange question to ask. I have built, for example, next to railroad tracks, places like that, so that I
Really?
could get affordability. But then I build a very nice house for the price, of course.
Yeah.
And I have found that people really want a home. They really want a place to call home.
Mm.
And if that home requires getting used to the sound of the train running by, they get used to the sound
They
of the
get
train
used to the
running by
sound of
and
the
they will
train.
purchase.
That's right.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And so that's the first, if you will, element in affordable construction is finding an affordable lot.
Can I
Now
ask
that's
you?
relative. If yes,
Yeah, inside of all of this, one of the things that happens quite often is, and we're encountering this right now, we're building a holiday cabin out of container homes.
hmm
And the first contractor who came to talk to us had his own agenda and he wasn't listening. Now, truthfully,
really,
he's dealing with my wife and my mother-in-law, which is its own thing, but he wasn't listening. It sounds to
which
me
makes it
like
even harder to listen.
that Good. Yeah. They
Okay.
don't listen to this podcast, so we can say that. Otherwise, I'm
Okay.
going to be in a lot of trouble. But it sounds to me like you actually listen, or you get inside the mind of your perfect, you think about the person who's going to live in your house and you
Mhm.
build for them. So do you find yourself trying to listen to or trying to relate to the perfect customer before you even buy the lot?
That's a slightly different topic, if you will. And the answer to your question is yes and no.
Mhm.
And the topic in which the answer is yes, and I'm absolutely with you, is a little bit of an anthropological one. I have built a lot of homes for specific ethnic groups.
Uh-huh.
And one of the more challenging projects I did, in fact, one that won some awards, was a house where a neighborhood of 24 homes where we had 12 different nationalities living there.
Uh-huh.
12 nationalities in 24 homes, 12 different languages within the 24 homes. So and it was in a historical or adjacent to a historical neighborhood. So I also had the restrictions of, I had to like have architecture that would satisfy
Right.
the neighborhood groups and the
Meet the zoning
historical
requirements.
planners and all that, right?
Yeah.
Which is always the biggest challenge. But here, I really focused on what what is, for example, someone from mainland China need in a house so that it feels like a home.
Mm.
Like we love certain things in a house, like an open kitchen, right? Open to the social area, which is
Right.
an abomination to other cultures and to other people,
Oh,
right?
oh,
Complete abomination. Why would you have your kitchen in the guest room, when you're trying to close and so the smells don't go through and it's like the kitchen for some a lot of most most of the world. In fact, what do they call an open kitchen? An American kitchen when you go abroad, because
oh,
it's in
really?
America that you have
This is
that.
a good piece of info for a lot of people here
Yeah.
listening who are doing
Well,
buildings or
if you're
renovations.
building for someone from another country, now I'm not talking about third generation or something like that, or someone like me. Obviously, from my accent, I'm very well acculturated. I have and want an open kitchen,
Right.
but my mother would not. When we moved to the United States, we moved to an apartment in New York City because it
Uh-huh.
used to be that immigrants came to New York City. Now they come to Miami or San Diego or something. But
Yeah.
we used to come to New York City. We moved to an apartment in New York City. And it had an open kitchen in the sense they had a peninsula, and the peninsula opened to the dining room.
Right.
Yeah, peninsula to the dining room, the living room on the left, the dining room in front of us, and we're standing in the kitchen. And there's a peninsula, a low counter.
Yeah.
And you're looking straight into the dining room. And my mom was like, oh my God, we will never be able to invite anyone over for dinner under these conditions. And she interpreted this as we had fallen so low
Oh,
in this
wow.
immigration that the developer of this building was so cheap, absolutely cheap, that didn't want to spend the money on building a wall between the kitchen and the dining room as there should be,
Right.
and just put this countertop. So we went out and bought a soji screen. These are these screens,
Right.
Japanese
Right.
screens, right? We put a soji screen on top of the counter to block the dining room from the
Yeah.
kitchen. Now, I remembered that later when working with people from other cultures and realized that this was indeed an important thing, and many other elements that we can talk about in a different podcast.
Sure.
So the answer to your question relative to this client base, if you will, or this circumstance in my home building career,
Mm.
I the answer is absolutely yes. Not only am I interested in talking with the client, but the client a lot of times will not even reveal all of their real needs out of some embarrassment or hesitation.
Or
So I
assumptions.
found myself, or
Assumptions. They think a kitchen means a kitchen in their mind as it's painted, not the one that you've
Right,
just
right, right,
described,
exactly,
which is like the
exactly.
King of Queens kitchen, if you remember that TV show, or I Dream of Lucy, right? That kitchen
Yes,
with the shutters. That's what you're talking about, right? In the peninsula.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Interesting.
Well, but you're correct about assumptions. For example, if you were to hire me to build a church, right? You would assume I kind of know intuitively the proportions of a cross. You said, put a cross on top of it. Okay, I'll put a cross on top of it. And I kind of know the cross is like, the vertical member is longer than the
Yeah.
horizontal member, but and the
You're right.
horizontal member goes about at the top third. It looks like a
Yeah. Looks
Christian
like a
cross. I
cross.
understand. Okay. Now, when I built a Buddhist monastery, and this despite having been a youthful Buddhist in my
Yeah.
youth, I we met all kinds of challenges where the monks understood that the Buddha platform had to be a certain height, and we would build it too low or too high, and they would look at us like, "Don't you see it's wrong?" No, because I didn't have, and we didn't have, the innate intuitive sense of what it's supposed to be. They did. So they
Right.
assumed everybody did. This is obvious. It's the Buddha platform. It should be so high. It wasn't obvious to us, just like that cross, right? You might get somebody from a
Interesting.
totally different culture with no exposure to Christian crosses, and they put up an X. And say, oh, it's a cross.
It's a cross, right?
Okay. So in the same way in housing, there's a lot of things. I built the first house for a Vietnamese family,
Hmm.
and the daughter did want a peninsula dividing the kitchen from the dining room. She wanted that.
Okay.
Well, I built one. When the mom who was going to live in the house came to the house, that peninsula was about up to here on her.
Oh, now for those
And
of you who
she
can't see
understood
this,
nothing about what,
yeah,
because, so, and I changed it. I didn't have to, but I did, because
yeah,
I thought, this is crazy. We have to give this lady who's going to live here a kitchen that's not,
that's functional and usable.
that's
Yeah, and
functional. That,
for those of you who are listening to this as a podcast, Fernando and I are having a video chat, and you can see this on YouTube as well. But he's holding his hands at eye level because I'm taking it that the grandmother was
yes,
shorter and couldn't see
yes,
over, which would be the same consideration if you had somebody who was in a walker or a wheelchair. You have to build to that need,
to suit. Yeah,
right? To suit, yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Well, cultures, ethnic groups, etc., have if you will, architectural preferences in the same way people have preferences about food. Like you sit down at a Mexican restaurant and you're having a burrito with beans and all that. You understand you're having Mexican food, that you're not having Chinese food, that you're not having French food, that you're not.
right.
Now, you may not know that you're not having Guatemalan food or something close, but you kind of have a sense that each culture has its cooking.
Right.
It used to be that each culture had their dress too. Now everybody dresses with a suit and tie or jeans, but there was a time when people had their own dress too.
Right.
Well, people still have architectural preferences. So you do have to. Well, the house that I build, which is affordable, I learned to build by doing kind of an ethnography, kind of looking into how people live and what they expect in the Midwest.
Oh, so
Because
you
I
got
came
really
from
specific now.
California.
Now you're not in New York, you're not
Yes.
in California, you're smack in the middle.
No, smack in the middle. And I had never dealt with people like this. Midwesterners. They watch football games and American football games and
Yeah,
stuff.
and their
This
steak
was new to
is
me.
fed with corn, not grass. I
Yes,
threw that
and they
out
eat
there on
it
purpose.
practically raw. They eat it raw. So,
Yeah.
but it was it was something that I had to learn. And so what did I do? You cannot go around asking your competitors. In my case, I was in Nebraska, so I can go around Omaha asking other builders, well, what's your most successful plan?
Yeah.
And why is it successful? So I went up to Michigan, which was near enough. And I interviewed builders in Michigan. I said, hey, I don't build in Michigan. I'm not your competitor, but
Yeah.
I'd like to know you
That's a
do it
great
so
lesson, by the way,
well.
Fernando. That
Yes.
in itself is a business coaching lesson to pass on to people. You can always call somebody who does what you do in another state, sometimes even
Mhm.
another country, and ask them anything you want. And then vice versa, give them information because they're not going to come and build. If you're in Tampa and they're in the, way over in the Texas Panhandle, they're not going to come over. You can have that
No.
conversation. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And people do like to talk about what they do well and what they've learned. So it's amazing. Like you get people to talk to you, right? About what they
Yeah.
intimately sometimes, I bet, about their lives and what they do well and their trade secrets and all of that. So it's the same. You call a guy up or you go visit him, which is what I used to do, is just go out there and talk to
The old
people. Right?
days.
They invite you for dinner. Here, let's talk.
Yeah.
Or I would invite them. There is, by the way, another way of doing that. If you're a member of the National Association of Home Builders, they have
Mm.
these groups of builders that are like support groups. Those builders are purposefully all in different markets, so you're not in competition.
I'm so glad you
They
said
actually
that.
have an open book type situation where you actually give a lot of information about your business, the challenges that you're
Mhm.
having, the successes you're having, your tricks, etc. And that's a good organization to join. And this is a great feature that you can join these support groups. Ask the one who's very much into that is David Gerstel, that I understand will be on your
He'll be a
program
guest on the
sometime
show
soon.
very soon. I'm reading
Yes.
his book, Nail Your Numbers. So I'm reading that right now.
Yes, that's excellent book. And his first book is like a seminal book, How to Run a Construction Company. Um, he initiated me in business. I was a framer and a carpenter,
Uh-huh.
working, hammering away. And that first house I built, I nailed every nail. And when I say nail, I mean nail, because we used to do with a hammer.
Yeah,
As a
the old
hammer,
days, right?
nail.
Yeah.
Right, that's right. And I even dug the foundation. The foundation, I dug it with a pick and a shovel. So I may not look like like a carpenter or a home builder today, but I spent a lot of my life doing that,
And that's how you
actually
came
doing
to
the
write.
physical work.
And that's how you came to write these books. I mean, affordability by design. And I'm sorry, what's the title of the other one?
Well, one is about building an affordable home, and the other is about affordable remodeling.
Yeah. And I hope people go
And
grab the book because it's very highly rated on Amazon. You've got, when you have one person giving you a review, that means about 1,000 people have thought about it, but only one did it. And you've got multiple reviews and multiple stars. So congratulations. And quite frankly, thank you, because we need to support the industry so that other people learn from us as they're moving forward as well. So thanks for that.
Mhm. Yeah, that book is a result of 9/11. 9/11,
Yeah.
we're coming up to the 20-year anniversary or
Yeah.
something of 9/11 now. And that book, uh, I used to write for Fine Home Building, but I
Mhm.
wrote about other people's stuff,
Right.
because they're a fine home building magazine. They're not affordable home building. They have
Do you still
fantastic
write for
homes.
Fine Home Building?
Oh yeah. I still write. If you look at the current issue, there's an article there on a very somewhat. It's not exactly a page turner. It's kind of a thick
Thrilling
article
topic.
about vapor management, the new code. And we're right now the hearings are going on for the next iteration of the code. But the 2021 code introduces all of these vapor management requirements,
Mm.
and they're prescriptive in the sense you have tables and this and that, and you cross-reference, but it's a little bit mind-numbing. It's like a head scratcher, and so it's going to be difficult for builders to understand how to interpret those tables.
Right.
And so we tried in the Fine Home Building article to make it as not simple, because it's not simple, but as understandable, plain speak, how to use the code, why it's there, what it's trying to prevent, and what it's trying to prevent is
And this
just
is the whole
deterioration.
building envelope. The whole
Yes, the
building
whole
envelope, or just
exterior envelope.
barriers and framing?
No, the whole, well, it's the vapor barrier is an exterior wall
Right.
consideration. And with the tightening of the exterior walls, you have and the fact that in our climate we have winter and summer, we have dry seasons and humid seasons. So the if you will, the behavior of vapor through that wall changes
Changes. That's right.
seasonally,
Yeah.
and it depends a lot on the materials you're using, what kind of paint, what kind of drywall, what kind of exterior sheathing, what kind of cavity insulation, what kind
Because it's
of
a system.
siding you're
It's a
using.
system,
It's a
right? The home is
system,
a system.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because each element in that sandwich, if you will, has, there's a lot of different options in each element in that sandwich, it becomes complicated. And you can easily get in a situation where you think you're building this brilliant wall, but really what you're doing is you're trapping vapor against the sheathing or on the interior
Mm.
surfaces of the wall. And what happens then? Well, unlike moisture, see, we put a lot of emphasis on moisture management. We have to have a drainage plane so bulk water can drain out. We flash all the windows so that there won't be a leak. A leak is relatively benign. You know why? Your window leaks, you know it. There's the stain on the wall. You see the water coming in. You call
Yeah.
the
The bubbling.
contractor. Hey, your
Yeah.
window leak is leaking. You go up there, you fix it. Leak in the roof. You fix the leak in the roof. It affects what? The drywall and the sheathing and all right underneath the window sill where it leaked. Vapor, though, is insidious. Vapor can get trapped in the wall,
Mm.
and it begins to create moisture, retain heat, microbes begin growing on it, and very slowly over cycles of years, the first thing that can happen is something like your OSB sheathing can debilitate. So it no longer has the structural value that you applied when you built that wall.
Oh
Now,
boy.
if you're in an earthquake area or in a high wind area, this could actually have a catastrophic consequence. More commonly, what you get is mold and dry rot. What is dry rot? Dry rot is basically the activity of vapor that comes and
Okay.
goes, and then the microorganisms are there during the season eating away at the wood, and
Yeah.
then it dries out, and it gets cold or hot or something happens, they go away, then it comes back again. Over time, this vapor will, without you even knowing it, destroy an entire elevation of a home. How many contractors that are listening right now haven't torn off some siding and said, "Oh, sorry, homeowner, but we got to resheathe the side of the house. It's completely rotten." Right?
Yeah. And the
That's
homeowner
what
says,
that
"Did
does.
you do that? How did you get in there and do that? Is that real?"
How did you do that? It wasn't that way before you came.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but this is addressed in the code. It's somewhat complicated. Current issue of Fine Home Building has an article that I wrote with a fellow by the name of Jay Crandall, who should be one of your guests, incidentally.
He should be.
He's an
Jay, if you're listening,
engineer.
you should be a guest. I don't
Oh,
know Jay yet.
I'll turn you on to Jay. He's
Okay.
one of the very few engineers that specialized in wood construction and residential wood construction. So
Mm.
he's an expert on all kinds of interesting things like frost protected shallow foundations. He wrote the code, the 24-inch on center, advanced framing. He wrote the code, all kinds of things related to residential construction. Few structural engineers devote their careers to houses. Most like to design bridges and skyscrapers. He wrote a history of wood construction, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
It is. You'll find out where the
You're a
16
wealth
came
of
from.
knowledge, Fernando. The span of topics that we've covered already in this podcast is incredible.
Well, I hope it's entertaining too.
I think it is.
I
I
hope
think it
you
is.
both find.
And I
But
actually
you
took
wanted
you
to
off your
talk about,
game there. You were talking about ethnic groups, but then you had split the
yes,
question into two because you said you agreed with me on one thing and disagreed on the other.
I disagree with you totally on the other. Why? Because if you want to design an affordable house,
Mm.
you have to design for affordability. It is not a custom home, not at all. And what do I do when I build affordable housings? I maintain a very strict criteria for my buyers, which is take it or leave it. This is
That's
what
the
I'm telling
Henry.
you.
That's the Henry Ford model. You can have any color of car you want as long as it's black.
Is black.
Right.
Okay. But you know what? We are trying to achieve an end, which is affordability. That
Mm.
doesn't mean that's the only value that exists. Maybe your value is to have the most fabulous home in the world. Okay. That's not affordability. That's a different criteria.
Okay.
Maybe you want to build to suit. I want these people to have the home of their dreams. Dream homes are typically not affordable.
Right.
But there are a lot of people who dream of having a home.
Mm.
I'm working with a couple right now. I've given them one choice, one change, and that's because of a um, health issue that one of the pair has that requires her to have certain accommodations in the bathroom.
Sure.
And I'm going to make those accommodations because I feel like, what are you going to do? Tell them, no, you can't bathe. No, you can't
That's
use
a
this.
very urgent time. Anytime you're going into the bathroom, it's urgent. So there's something
Yes.
going on.
So,
You got to, yeah.
so I do make exceptions. But in general, I tell them, I am not a custom builder.
Right.
This is not a custom home. You're buying a home as if it was an existing house. Here's the plans. Look
So
them
you've got a
over.
left layout and a
You'll-
right layout. Choose your flip or flop, and
Don't choose nothing. This is the way it's going down on your lot. These are the exterior colors. This is the interior. This is etc.
okay.
It's up to you.
You don't even deviate on
I
left-hand layout or right-hand layout. It's the same. It's going to
no.
be this way.
Yes, I decide. Well, I mean, I may, as a client, may deviate in the sense that I am the one that's the owner. I'm the one that's paying for the construction, and I'm the one that's
I see.
then going to sell it. So I may have alternate because I'm building 3 of them in a row and I don't want them to look the same, or because the lot requires, would work better this way. So the answer to your question on the on that second issue where you were talking about adopting the house for your client, I consider myself the client. Why? Because I'm the owner. I'm the one deciding. I bought the lot. I'm building the house. You may want to buy it, but I am the owner until you do. So
Good
I
point.
am the client. I
Right.
am the client. And who is then providing services to that home? The subcontractors, right? And the subcontractors are like the folks you're dealing with right now. They often have a very hard time listening, looking at the plans, seeing the advantages that were designed into the plan.
Mm.
Because affordability, we talked about the lot, has to be an affordable lot to start. But affordability begins the moment you draw a line on a piece of paper, you've just committed a cost. So there are elements of affordable design
Mm.
that go into the design of an affordable home that you can take advantage of in the sense of cost savings if the subcontractors realize that they exist.
If they buy into the
So,
concept, this is an affordable home. It's about
yes,
efficiency. So do you
yes.
have certain ways that you lay out a wall so that you have to minimize cutting? Or do you use different products that, you're not doing stick framing, you're maybe doing another kind?
Yes. Um, I have first of all, I begin with a basic footprint that will fit on the site.
Mhm.
Okay. I begin with a square. Begin with a square because the square is the most affordable shape. If you do the math, if you build a rectangle home of the same square footage as a square home, and then you multiply, you add up the lineal feet or the square feet, if you like. I always use 8-foot walls, so I just use the lineal feet. If you take the lineal feet of wall to
Uh-huh.
encircle that same square footage, say it's 800 square foot footprint,
Right.
add up the linear feet of wall to inscribe that with a rectangle or inscribe that with a square, and you will discover that generally the square is about 25% less exterior wall.
I
Now,
mean,
to
that's
get more
fantastic. And
complicated,
it's such a,
yeah,
it's, it,
that's the first thing.
yeah.
Now, why are affordable homes generally two-story? So my house, typical affordable house, 1,600 square feet, 800 square foot squares. Why? Well, because when you divide a house in elevation, in other words, a lower level and the second story, you have 800 square feet of foundation and 800 square feet of roof.
Right.
Build that same house as a ranch, you have 1,600 square feet of foundation, 1,600 square feet of roof, and those are two very expensive items that you can reduce by the way you plan the house. You're still going to have a kitchen, you're still going to have 2 baths, or you're still going to have some
Right.
elements that more or less have a cost involved. But the area where you can really save is on that, how many square feet of foundation, how many square feet of roof.
Right.
Here's another element. When you talk about a roof, right? Roofs can get complicated and they often have overlaps, like intersecting gables. They're very pretty. You have a house, you maybe have a gable that points to the 2 side walls,
Right.
left and right. And then you want an intersecting gable on the front of the house to give it that nice look, right? That intersecting gable, what happens underneath where the roofs overlap? A tremendous amount of sheathing, trusses, lumber, extra roofing, etc. So I never have intersecting roofs. So if I have a garage roof that runs perpendicular to the house roof,
Yeah.
then the garage is lower than the second story of the house, and the garage butts into the house's wall, not into the roof. It doesn't overlap the roof. If I have a gable in the front of the house, it's lower than the main house gable, so I can butt it into the house itself, like a little porch with a gable
Right.
on it.
Right.
And
Right.
the
Right.
porch with a gable will never overlap the house roof. So I
That's
try to
value
avoid
engineering at its
those
core,
roofs.
isn't
That
it?
value engineering, yes.
Yeah.
The other step in value engineering, and you begin doing this, by the way, this is kind of the way you progress through a set of plans. The next thing you do is you center all your utilities. If possible, you put it right in the middle. How did the old style houses the Cape Cods and stuff, the old homes. Where did they have their chimney?
Right in the middle.
In the middle,
Yeah.
right? What? And then you put your bedrooms and stuff around it because the chimney would warm, it radiate and warm the house, right smack in the middle. They didn't have it on the end of the house. That's a modern thing because it's just a decorative element. If you're actually going to heat your house, you got a wood stove, you're going to put it in the middle of the
That's
house.
a great
right?
point, actually. Yeah.
And so that's the traditional way of doing it. And if you build what I call the utility core right through the center of the house, that's where you have your furnace. That's where you have your main plumbing runs. Your bathrooms branch off that utility core. All of your air conditioning system goes off that utility core. So that's another element that helps you reduce the lineal feet of duct, the lineal feet of plumbing, the lineal, plumbing lines, etc. All
Wiring,
sort of
cable, everything.
yes, all the rough mechanicals and electrical get reduced. Okay. Now, sometimes you can't have it right smack in the middle, but that's where you start, and then you kind of move it around a little bit and you get it as close as you can. There are compromises you have to make because you also need a hallway, and then you need the
Stairs to get upstairs. And yeah.
stairs. And so it's not like this is how I begin, if you will, when I start playing with blocks, how I lay about my blocks. Then, and only at this point, when I've done all this, do I begin to look at the floor plan. People generally design the floor plan. They think, oh, I want a kitchen like this, and then let's add a family room, and then let's put the bedrooms. Let's see the master bedroom should be over here, and they think in terms of features that the house should have, right? They inevitably get a complicated, highly articulated plan with all kinds of ins and outs and things, and it becomes unaffordable. And there is no way to turn that plan into an affordable plan. You can't. When I wrote the book, and it was published, and people got to know about it, because for a little while it actually had some, was being reviewed in the newspapers,
right?
And so people would come to my office
when it's new and fresh.
And they would say, they would say, I designed this house with my architect, and he said it would cost me $250,000 to build, but the lowest bid came in at $600,000. What can you do? And they'd hand me the plans, and I'd look at them and I'd say, well, very little.
You got the wrong house for the question.
Yeah, you get. I mean, this is not. You're not going to be able to get this to the price you want. Now, could you still save some money in that house with certain techniques? Yes, with construction techniques such as shallow frost-protected foundations. You're in an area which has a 42-inch depth frost-free footing. What they go, you go down 42 inches below the frost depth. You run that all around the perimeter of your home. It's a big home. It could be a lot of concrete. Now you could reduce that to, say, 14 inches of concrete, a 14-inch footing. And how is that done? Well, through insulation. You add insulation to the perimeter of the foundation, and it's prescribed in the IRC, of the International Residential Code. There's a section that describes how to do that, the frost-protected shallow foundation section. Now that's a construction technique. It's not a design technique. It's an engineering technique, if you will. That's a method of building that very few builders take advantage of, but it can save you a lot of money. Imagine the difference between 14 inches deep and 42 inches deep.
Yeah.
Okay? So there are elements like that. Here's another one. A lot of times builders have an interior footing on the slab, under a slab, right? This could be a basement or it could be a slab house. You have an interior footing. You have your perimeter footings, you have an interior footing, say a center bearing wall in the basement. You're going to put an interior footing in there. They will dig that interior footing below the slab. Say the footing has to be 8 inches deep or 12 inches deep. They will excavate 12 inches below the slab, and then fill that footing, and sometimes do the footing first and then pour a slab. If you're required to have a 12-inch deep footing and you scribe 12 inches below the slab, what size footing do you actually have? If your slab is 4 inches thick, you have a 16-inch deep footing. If you need 12, why build with 16? So if I've got a 4-inch slab and I want to add a footing underneath that slab, I take into account the thickness of my slab. And if I had to have a 12-inch deep footing there, well, I would scribe 8 inches. 8 plus 4, basic arithmetic, equals 12, right?
What an interesting way to look at things. Yeah. So
there's a lot of elements like that. Many, 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 many elements like that. And each of them saves you a little money
Well,
And it's in
Fernando,
those.
we talk about the profit leaks that happen in
Right.
construction. There's 8 areas of your business where profit is leaking out. And so eloquently, you just outlined a couple of very simple ones. There's some people who listen to the show that are saying, yeah, yeah, I already do that. There's a lot more people who maybe have known it but forgot it. And I'm glad you brought it back up, because we always have to go back and question our assumptions. We have to go back
Mhm.
and question our assumptions, because the way we do things today works when we made it up, when we invented it in our minds 3 years ago, 6 years ago, when your dad started the company, but it maybe doesn't work anymore. And you have to reinvent the business, reinvent our thinking.
Well, some of these things that we're talking about are the only ways to control cost today, because it's very hard. Like, I engineer my plumbing so that it's very easy to do. What do I do for the electrician, for example? The electrician has to drill through all these joists to get his wires through, right? I've seen
Right.
that, 1 million holes through the joists. Spends hours drilling and drilling and drilling. Instead of that, you know what I do? I drop two 2x4s below the joist, and I say, this is your wire chase. Run all the wire that runs lengthwise on the house,
Yeah.
just staple it underneath the joists. Then I'll slap a piece of drywall, between these two 2x4s, and your wires are covered, and you don't have to drill any holes, or very few holes.
Oh, wow. So you just reduced the labor time for the
Mhm.
electrician by,
Right.
I mean, it's got to be 20% labor time saving.
I
Uh,
couldn't tell you. I did the experiment with the plumbers to actually figure out the labor reduction in a percentage wise, but I never did with the electrician. However, it's very hard to get an electrician to take those kinds of things into account when he gives you a price the
mm.
first time. Now,
Yeah, yeah.
what you can do is you can say, hey, now that you've done the house, could you give me a little bit of a price break? It was pretty easy to do, wasn't it? It went pretty quick. I noticed your guys were here just 2 days and they were done with the rough wiring. Maybe you could give me a little break, or at least don't raise your price. Let me hold this price for a while.
Right.
And and usually usually that'll happen. So it's a lot of work to create these kinds of cost savings. It's not easy, and it's not one thing. Because if you do one thing, you will save $1. If you want to save $10,000, well, let's say that you do one thing, you'll save $10. If you want
Right.
to save $10,000, you're going to have to, do a thousand things. There's 1,000 line items in the house. You have to
Or
do each
you
and every one.
or you save that $100 per house for how many houses you're going to build.
That's true.
Just a really quick question. How much educating of the inspector do you have to do? For instance, in that wiring chase that you put in the
Yes.
rafters.
Yes.
And maybe we'll start to wind down on this question, but how much educating of people around you do you find you need to do?
A lot. A lot. One of
A
the things
lot.
that I
You
do,
got to see
one of the
Fernando's
things that I
face when he
do,
said that. He went, yeah, yeah, a lot, a lot.
well, if you're working with a draftsman, you have to educate the draftsman. They'll be telling you, no, no, you can't do that. Everybody does blah, blah, blah. I understand everybody does blah, blah, blah. Everybody but me. And this is why. You got to educate
And
make
this
sure
is
that you get
why.
the drawings right. Then you do have to educate the inspectors. And this is how I've done it. I've set up, like, I'm going to build a neighborhood in Omaha,
Uh-huh.
Nebraska. This is not example. This is not a hypothetical. This is real. Build a neighborhood in Omaha. I got myself involved with a program at the time was called PATH, the Partnership for Advancing Technology and Housing. They were a HUD-funded project, and they were about doing all kinds of innovative things in construction. At the time, things like PEX piping, wireless switches, insulated siding, all kinds of things. So I said, I'm going to use a lot of your, what they called at the time, tech sets, which were, methods of building that they would create a guidebook for, tech set
Yeah.
book. Those are still available through HUD, by the way. So I got with them and we made a demonstration project. I'm about to do a demonstration project here. Again, it's an introduction to a town for me. Create a demonstration project. I get manufacturers that sell these particular products that want to promote them involved. I get somebody like HUD or somebody like Home Builders or somebody like Habitat or somebody like some institution that'll
Yeah.
help me. And I get a lot of guerrilla marketing out of it, and I pitch it as, of course, advancing technology in housing. This is a superior way to build. A lot of times, in my case, it's actually just a cheaper way to build.
Right.
But by creating a demonstration project, you create kind of a little zone of permission. Okay, we'll let you do it this once for the sake of this demonstration project. And then what do? I hold building classes in the house. I invite local builders and I invite the local building inspector, and I have a barbecue with hot dogs and hamburgers and whatever. And I invite them to come and see. And I have photographs, the whole, living room of the house packed on little chairs with building inspectors and plan
Right.
reviewers and, and local builders and stuff. And that's how I make it legitimate. I
Yeah.
make it an instructional kind of a thing. And I put myself on their side. Like, I want to try this. This sounds really good. I've been exploring this, and I'd like to see what you think of it. Let's do it, and let's work together on it. I'm not. I already know why I want to do it, what I want to do. I already
Yeah.
know it works
Right.
and
But you come at
everything.
it from a
But
humble,
yes,
you're using their judo against them.
yeah, using their
Yeah, use
strength.
their
Yeah,
ego,
yeah,
like to say, oh, I'm really looking for
exactly.
ideas. How could we make this even more efficient? And of
Yes,
course, then
yeah,
when somebody
yeah.
gets asked that, they're more open to the
Yeah,
possibilities of the question on the other side, right?
absolutely. You're absolutely correct. And those are, I guess, human relation techniques. The people that will help you with this a lot of times, if you're trying to build affordable housing, are the nonprofits, the what they call chodos, which are these organizations that are they're non-governmental organizations,
Uh-huh.
but they channel funds, city funds, funds for urban development, things like that. They're the ones that teach classes on how to get a mortgage, and they teach homeowner education classes and all that. And they need stock to sell because they're teaching these people, how to get a mortgage and how to get themselves qualified for a mortgage. But then all of those people have limited means and can only get qualified for kind of an affordable mortgage,
Right,
low
right.
cost, a lower price house. They a lot of times will be your advocate, and they will help you politically to
Mm,
do the kinds of things you need to do to accomplish affordability. They will be your cover. They'll be the reason you're doing it. And then with that, you gather idealistic people, because there are subcontractors and there are people that say, that's a really good idea. People
they're
can't afford
visionary.
houses.
Right.
Yes, my own children can't afford a house. I'd like them to be able to live here near me. And so you can find people that are in the spirit of what you're trying to do.
Right.
And it may not be the plumber you're working with right now. It may be a new plumber that
Well, new
is in the
relationships,
spirit
right?
of it. Yeah.
Business, build relationships, develop relationships, be a man of influence, which Fernando, you certainly are. If, one of the things I always try to say is that I'm here to change the world. I think you're actually doing it.
I don't know about the world, but it's
No,
hard
I
to
think you're
change the
changing the world,
neighborhood.
man. I think,
It's
I'm
hard to
going to put you
change
down as a, yeah.
one municipality.
What? Well, listen, being on my show, you've changed somebody's
Yeah.
world. Somebody today,
Okay.
think about this. And Fernando, I'd like you to think about it, but everybody listening as well. There's going to be something you do today that's going to make somebody smile or think a little bit differently. And that gets passed on. Not Education is a beautiful thing because we pass it from person to person and it grows in value. It doesn't get
Mhm.
worse. And so if you're doing something worthwhile in the world, if you're showing somebody a better way to have an outdoor living space, they get to make other people's lives happy when they come over for that barbecue. Whatever, you fix a bathroom so that a handicapped person can get to it. You're actually doing
Mhm.
great things. Be proud of it. And you've
Yep.
done a great, I'm so inspired listening to you. I've written, you know what I have in my notes here? Ask
Mhm.
Fernando back again.
Oh, okay.
I think we're going to have you back on the show. Um,
Sure. Love to. Love doing
I,
this.
I get the sense we've only scraped the surface of the things and the wisdom that you apply to building technology and value engineering. You're a great storyteller. If people want to find out more about you, do you have your book there? Can you hold it up if you have a copy?
Sure. I had it just in case
Oh,
because I wrote it a long time ago. So sometimes people ask me, what about page 53? What do you like?
yeah.
What's on
Building
page
an
53?
affordable house. Now, that is one that's on Amazon as well. The one that I was looking
Yeah.
at previously, you've got a couple, right? Affordability by
Yeah.
Design. Building an
Uh-huh.
affordable house is the one you just held up.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'll
he's
show
going
you.
got
I'm
more.
going to the. Yeah, I'm going off screen here to get to the.
You're going to the good
If you
stuff.
want
You're going to the good
stats. This
cantina.
is the affordable
Affordable
book
remodel.
about affordable. And this focuses a lot on what I learned in art school in doing design sets, because
Right.
it's a lot. This one is all about how to make something look expensive when it's not, how to create
Oh,
illusions,
the illusions.
illusions, illusions.
Ah, so that one's called
Um,
affordable remodel. So we have
Remodel,
lots of
yeah.
remodelers and renovators
Yeah.
who listen to this
This
show.
was an
Thank you.
interesting book to research. When I did my first book, which is this building an affordable house, the
Mm,
genesis of which was at 9/11. We never finished that. But um, when I got the contract to do that book, I thought, for people to learn about what I do personally on my houses is too limited, and because I happen to be building in the Midwest, what about people in California? What about people in
yeah.
South Florida? So what I did is I toured all the major markets and interviewed the best affordable home builder in each market. What I mean by the best, I went and I looked to see who was selling the most affordable houses in each market. And I went then to ask them, how'd you do it? How do you
Yeah.
contain costs? And a lot of them were, companies like Pulte that had a subsidiary that built these inexpensive houses in this area. And they would have inevitably, like the vice president of value engineering. I'd interview the vice president of value engineering. I interviewed the chief of, at the time, of Habitat, who had
Right.
seen every type of material there is to make an affordable house. And then I gathered that information into the book. Now, when I went to do the affordable remodeling book, the second one, that didn't work because all the major remodelers I went to visit was like, well, how do you make your houses more affordable for your clients? No, we don't. You
Yeah.
don't?
Yeah. We
No,
just do what they
we don't.
want, right?
We just charge cost plus. We don't. And so I was a little bit flummoxed, like, well, what am I going to write about that if nobody does anything to make the houses cheaper? So then I asked them, I discovered I was asking the wrong question. The right question was, what did you do when you remodeled your house to save
Ah,
money? And there I began to learn a ton of things. What did you do when you remodeled your house to save money? What did you do when you remodeled your rentals to save money? It was the wrong question I was asking. Again, there they are the client, and
right.
there they are worried about the bottom line. Whereas when they're building for a third party, they're not worried about the bottom line.
I
They
love
just
it.
are. So the last book is this one here, which is
Oh,
called
what's this one?
Architectural Design for Traditional Neighborhoods. Architectural
Architectural
Design for
design for traditional neighborhoods. Is that on Amazon as
neighborhoods.
well?
Yes. Nope. This one is not on Amazon right now, but you can actually get a PDF copy free if you write to me. I'll give you a link on where to obtain it. I'll give you my email address here in a second. But there's a way of building now, which is called the traditional neighborhood development, or TND, traditional neighborhood development. And traditional style exteriors are a very, very popular type of
Mm,
exterior. And these traditional neighborhoods are typically quite expensive, and the criteria for developing a traditional neighborhood can be quite complex because it was developed by some very academic people who have a lot of like philosophical things, and you start reading about it and you get kind of turned off. It's not like a builder's type stuff.
it's a
you know
historical
it's
recollection, and they want to recreate a grainy picture they saw somewhere. And
Well, it has a lot of historical references, a lot of references to classical architecture, a lot of great stuff if that's what you're into, but mind-boggling, boring, and uninspiring if you're not. But you do know that these neighborhoods are very popular.
uh,
So what we did, and I have a partner in writing this book called architect called Korkut Onaran. Korkut Onaran is a new urbanist and a traditional neighborhood urbanist. He's a teacher at the Colorado University of Colorado, as an urban and architecture instructor, and he has an architectural firm that works with major developers like KB Homes or these kind of large national builders who want to get on the bandwagon of doing these traditional neighborhoods, but
mm,
don't really understand what they're all about. And he has a hard time, or has had a hard time, sitting in his architectural office, explaining to them what it's about, what the principles are, etc., and then distilling, stripping away all the academic stuff so that it becomes something a builder can digest and accept and adopt their
see how they can
style,
build it and make money and be proud doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we cannot get the finest carpenters in the world and bring them from Switzerland to do, no, and it's not necessary. So this book was a result of those conversations, my own experience in developing these type of neighborhoods, and how I did it in terms of stripping down. So this is really kind of a, how do you do a traditional neighborhood affordably? That's really what the book is about. Traditional neighborhood affordably. And the father of traditional neighborhood design, an architect by the name of Andres Duany, who would be probably your most fun and somewhat controversial guest if you had him on. I'd hook you up with him.
Maybe I should. Yeah.
But he wrote our forward. He wrote our forward to the book and kind of legitimized it in that world of traditional neighborhood development and architecture. But all these terms like pocket neighborhoods,
yeah,
and things like a new old house, or a what do they call it? The missing middle. All of these terms that you've probably heard derive from this movement of traditional neighborhood design.
I live in a neighborhood that, my house is built in 1893. It's a very, very old house. And on occasion, a house in our neighborhood, a home in our neighborhood gets knocked down and they go to build something else, but they have to build to an architectural standard. It has to look like it was there the whole time. Okay. And I think that's what you're talking about. I have not heard those terms for neighborhood design. You're way ahead of me. I'm not familiar. I wonder how many of our listeners are familiar with neighborhood design. If anybody is, please reach out and leave a comment so that both Fernando and I can follow up and perhaps give you even more information on that.
But if you wanted to do that, build in your neighborhood, if I was going to build in your neighborhood, or somebody was going to build in your neighborhood, and they wanted to kind of like figure out, well, what should I build? What should I look like, etc., then this book will help. This book will help. This book is architectural design for traditional neighborhoods. It'll tell you what, for example, if your neighborhood is all of houses that are that emphasize their height. Victorian homes emphasize their height, right?
Right.
They're vertical type houses, right?
Yeah.
Victorians. Other houses,
a Dutch colonial that stretches out, like seems to stretch.
Okay. Other houses emphasize their horizontal dimension, right? So if you had a neighborhood full of homes that emphasize their verticality, that's what an architect would say, or their vertical dimension, you cannot put like a 20th century modern between them. It'll look ridiculous,
right?
Because it doesn't fit within the neighborhood. Old neighborhoods were neighborhoods in the sense that the entire block face, the street, looks like a place. Right. When you go to an old neighborhood, you have a sense of place. Oh, this is the place. What a beautiful neighborhood. That's what I'd say when you came to your house. Then I may comment on how cool your house is, but my first thing would be, what a nice neighborhood. But if I went to your house in a modern subdivision, I wouldn't say that.
No.
Right? It may be impressive, big gate or something at the end. I would compliment your house. Oh, this is a really impressive house you live in. The house. Builders tend to put their houses like cars. Where you have a car, the car is never shown in traffic. You never see a commercial and the guy is driving in
stuck in traffic.
Right?
Yeah.
He's always alone on on a country road, or out in the Alps or something.
That's
or the
true.
car
That's
is like
true.
turning on a platform or placed on a rock in the Grand Canyon. It's on a pedestal. It's like a sculpture to be looked at. And unlike a sculpture to be looked at, a neighborhood is like a forest. It's an environment. So this book talks about how do you figure out what kind of tree or house to plant within that environment, within that name. What is the style? How do you tease it out? When was it built? What are the characteristics? And once you've narrowed, honed in on it, you can begin to design something that's friendly, compatible, neighborly, if you will.
You are an incredible guest for the show.
Well, I'm glad you liked it.
I don't even know what to say, man. And stumping me takes some work. Now I want the book. How do we get this book?
You give me your address and I'll send it.
Well, no, I mean, but how would other people get? It's a PDF, you said?
Yeah, it's a PDF, and what they can do is you can buy it to a hard copy like I have. It's inexpensive, and if you write to me, I will give you a code so you get it at cost. It's like a $17 book if you buy it, and it's on a particular site, and it's easier if I just give you the link than if I say it and then you look up. My email address is very easy. So through my email address, you write to me, I send you the link. I'll give
Okay.
you a code. You can buy it if you like to put things in your library, and you'll get it at a very low cost. If you want to pay nothing at all, I'll give you a link where you can download a copy, PDF copy for free. It's not as nice. I
No, of
recommend
course it's
getting
not.
the hard copy, but you get the information.
Yeah.
And my books, the ones I was showing, why am I talking like this? If you buy one of my books at Amazon, I make 10 cents. Okay.
Yeah, I
So
hear
I
you.
don't care if you buy my book. You can buy it used. I'm happy to share the knowledge.
Yeah.
And if you buy it used and you write a little review if you like it, don't write a review if you don't like it. But if you like it, write
Fernando,
a little review.
it's funny you say that you make 10 cents. I just wrote a book as well. Irrelevant, right? But it's about construction. I've sold thousands of copies on Amazon. And the other day my wife said, "Oh, we got a check for $142."
Right.
I said, "So what?"
Yeah.
There's my career as a writer. $142. Like,
Right.
and everybody's so, "Oh, Tom, you wrote this book. You must be rolling in cash." Yeah, rolling in cash. It's going the other way. It's all going out the door, not coming in.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny you say that.
That's what it's about. So,
Yeah.
So my email address,
Yes.
to get to the point, is my name, Fernando, 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 at buildingaffordable.com. Building Affordable, just the way it's spelled, BUILDINGAFFORDABLE, buildingaffordable.com. Fernando at buildingaffordable.com. Write to me, say, hey, can I get that book you said I could get as a PDF for free? And I'll send you the link.
Love it.
And otherwise, put my name on Google. You'll find all the other ones.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're findable on Google. I mean, that's the way I reached out to you. If I want to find a guest, I go find them. And I'm so glad I did. I mean, you were referred to me by David Gerstel, who's going to be a guest. He's coming up as a guest.
He's a fabulous guy.
Yeah, very knowledgeable. Very knowledgeable. And I'm so thankful to just be able to ask you these questions. I think you've passed on a lot of knowledge today. I think we're going to have you back as a guest, but once we hang up the call, that's when I'm going to ask you again to see what we can have you back on. But thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. Thank you very much.
Have a great day.